First, I'm going to play for you the voice recording raw, unprocessed with no plugins and nothing added. And then I'm going to engage the plugins and the processing that I've created. I want you to listen to the difference between the tone and the dynamic consistency. Listen to what happens.
In 1937, legendary aviator Amelia Earhart vanishes into the Pacific. In 1937, legendary aviator Amelia Earhart vanishes into the Pacific.
So in this video, I'm going to show you what I did with the processing to refine and optimize the sound with plugins. Then I'm going to show you what could be done with the raw audio capture to make the processing sound even better. Hey, I'm glad you're here. My name is Lenny B. I am an audio nerd. I love tweaking compression and EQ and plugins and audio and microphone and voice recordings. And I've got a broadcast background, and I've been working in broadcasting and presenting stories and communicating on the radio or online for years, decades really. And what I do is help clients make a better connection with their audience. You know, when you have a very clear, natural voice recording sound on your microphone, the more natural, the more authentic you could make that audio, the stronger the connection, the stronger story you can tell, the stronger emotional connection you're able to make with your audience. That helps cultivate an audience. So that means if you've got your own channel, if you're creating content for an audience, you're looking to cultivate an audience, or if you're just a voice actor or a voiceover artist, or you're creating content for your own channel, the better you can get your audio and the more natural and authentic you can make that sound, the stronger that connection is going to be. So people come to me to help diagnose their audio and create custom processing chains and just audio tips and things. So hopefully you're going to get some of that information going through this video. And this is really a good example. His name is Mark, and I want to thank him for letting me use his audio for the channel as a really kind of a little test case here. Mark is using a Rode NT1 microphone, and it's going into a Universal Audio Volt USB-C audio interface. And this equipment is absolutely capable of producing top quality audio. And what I ask anybody who sends me their recording for me to diagnose it, I look for a raw recording. I want the microphone straight into the audio interface and then right to the DAW. No plugins. We're looking for a proper gain stage. And then I can really listen to the audio and see what's going on before any of the processing, because that foundation is really important. So let's actually listen to what Mark is working with. This is no plugins. This is his voice straight to the Rode NT1, to his audio interface, and then captured on his computer. So this is raw, unprocessed audio.
In 1937, legendary aviator Amelia Earhart vanishes into the Pacific, just weeks from completing an historic flight around the world. No wreckage, no final answer, only scattered clues across remote islands and endless ocean.
When I examine some raw audio, it tells me so much, and it's really important to make sure you've got a proper gain structure. I listen for an imbalance naturally that's happening in the room, because your room has more to do with your recording than you realize, especially if you're in a smaller space. Your microphone captures your voice. The microphones and the modern technology of the microphones available for really an affordable price today, they're so sensitive. The electronics are so improved. They're very ultra sensitive. It's like I like to think of them sometimes as a microscope for your ears, right? It's just really good at capturing every little detail, especially a large diaphragm condenser microphone like the Rode NT1. So what it's doing is it's picking up his pure voice, but it's, his voice continues through the room, and those echoes, depending upon how far away the walls are, those echoes bounce off the walls and also get captured by the microphone. So the mic's capturing two different things. I'm going to play this again, and I want you to listen for the influence that room might be having. And I'm hearing it because I'm hypersensitive to these type of things, but I hear a frequency imbalance. This is the limiting factor for Mark at this point. It's not horrible, but there is definitely an influence that the room is having on his mic. Let's listen again. I'm hearing a little bit of noise, but the biggest limiting factor is a low-mid frequency imbalance. There's a low-mid frequency space that's much louder than the other frequencies, and that's because of those reflection sounds. Let's listen to the raw recording again.
In 1937, legendary aviator Amelia Earhart vanishes into the Pacific, just weeks from completing an historic flight around the world. No wreckage, no final answer, only scattered clues across remote islands and endless ocean.
What we're looking at on screen now is, I think, probably one of the tools I use the most. It's one of my favorite Waves plugins. It's the F6 Floating Band Dynamic EQ. And one of the reasons why I just love this thing is I can get so detailed with this equalizer, and I'm going to be using it to kind of compensate for that one reflection sound that I'm hearing. So that is this EQ that we're going to be working with. And these two things on the right side here, if you don't know, these are meters. These are U-lean meters, and there's a free version of these. I love them. They're great because they tell me peak information, so I could see that I'm peaking at just under 6 dB. This meter on the left side is before the processing. So this is the level I'm getting before the EQ. And this one on the right side is the level that I'm getting after the EQ. And I put them side by side because I'm constantly gain staging. When I make a change with the EQ, I want to make sure I adjust the output of the EQ so I'm usually matching the overall loudness. I want to get as close as possible. I'm going to turn the EQ on, and I'm going to look at what this EQ is reading.
In 1937, legendary aviator Amelia Earhart vanishes into the Pacific.
This yellow line here, this yellow squiggly line, is showing me the peak frequency information. These are the peaks in each frequency space, the low material on the left side, the high frequency material, the mids in the middle. And you can see there's kind of a hump here. There's a little bump in the lower mid frequency range. Now, when I examine this audio file, when I listen to the raw audio file, I can hear already a specific frequency that I want to attack. I want to balance, and that's really what we're going to be doing here. Let me show you why I love this EQ so much. When I right-click, so I could choose a band on this EQ, and when I right-click, it solos the band, and I can scroll through and find that frequency. Now, let me do that. I've got it in my head after I have that frequency, the sound, that frequency space in my head, but now I'm going to pinpoint it. I'm going to find it on this frequency map here, and then it's going to help me know which one to balance.
In 1937, legendary aviator Amelia Earhart vanishes into the Pacific.
That is the frequency, 335. That's the one I'm hearing. So I've used the solo button on my F6. I've located that frequency, and now I'm going to drop it down and fine-tune the width, the Q of this frequency band.
In 1937, legendary aviator Amelia Earhart vanishes into the Pacific.
So just as a rough estimate, that is the overabundant frequency space that I'm hearing, and so I'm correcting it with this EQ change. And what I'm going to do now is let me play for you before and after. Actually, before we do that, I want to balance this out. So really what I've done here, in this frequency band number 3, I've lowered that frequency space. Now these meters really come into play. I'm going to look at before the EQ, and I'm going to look at after the EQ, and I want to make sure that they're balanced because I've removed energy with my F6 floating band dynamic EQ. I've found the frequency, but now because I've removed energy, that extra frequency, overabundance frequency in his voice there, I need to replenish it going out so these two are the same. Then when we turn on and off the EQ, you're really only going to hear the tone balance difference.
In 1937, legendary aviator Amelia Earhart vanishes into the
If I look at the integrated loudness, it's negative 21.6. This is negative 23.6. That's an average of 2 dB difference. So I'm going to tune this up a little bit. Let's see. So I'm going to increase the output, the overall output, by 2 dB. And now they should be about the same. I'll play it again.
In 1937, legendary aviator Amelia Earhart.
Now they're the same. I'm hearing something else here. I'm going to grab another band. Something else just jumped out at me.
In 1937, legendary aviator Amelia Earhart vanishes into the Pacific. In 1937, legendary aviator Amelia Earhart vanishes into the Pacific, just weeks from completing an historic flight around the world. No wreckage, no final answer, Only scattered clues arose.
When I increase these bands to try to find and really spotlight the frequency that I want to adjust, it obviously makes those frequencies louder, so it changes this. So now that I've got this where I want it to balance out the frequencies, I'm going to reassess the loudness going out. Let's see what we've got now.
In 1937, legendary aviator Amelia Earhart vanishes into the Pacific.
It's not much difference. I'm going to bump it up a little bit more just to make it more equal. So let's listen to the raw audio again, and then I'll engage just the EQ so you can hear the balance difference that we've made and removing or compensating really for the room influence that is happening on his voice recording.
In 1937, legendary aviator Amelia Earhart vanishes into the Pacific, just weeks from completing an historic flight around the world.
Now, it's kind of a drastic change, right? And all I'm doing is balancing out the overabundant frequency space in about 335. Now, that is custom for him, his voice in his room on his mic with the size and the acoustic treatment that he has. Every room, every microphone, every voice is going to be totally different. So I'm using the EQ to balance out the frequencies so it's more balanced. Every frequency space is represented equally. And what that does is, I'm going to play it for you again, but really, when you step back and kind of zoom out, what does it do? It really makes his voice sound more natural. It sounds more up close. Again, all I'm doing is EQing. I'm using my ear to identify where that frequency is so we can have a better canvas to work from, okay? It's more natural, it's more authentic. The voice sounds closer to you as a listener. Let's listen again. And I'm only removing material and then raising the whole thing up so the volumes balance out. So really you can hear when I turn it on and off, you can hear only the tone balance difference. Let's listen again. First without the EQ, and then I'll engage just the EQ.
In 1937, legendary aviator Amelia Earhart vanishes into the Pacific. In 1937, legendary aviator Amelia Earhart vanishes into the Pacific.
When your foundation is balanced and solid, the EQ doesn't have to do much compensating. Now, I think his voice sounds pretty good. You know, there is definitely compensating. I'm having to use a lot of pressure on the EQ to correct the balance. So, I would say that his voice is really below the threshold because I really don't want to have to do this much EQ compensating before I do the rest of the processing to sweeten and refine. When your voice recording is balanced or more balanced than this to begin with, there's not a huge overabundance of a frequency space because of an issue with reflections, short reflections or long reflections in the room. I call that stable. And let me explain why. It's stable is actually a really good way to describe it because when you have a frequency imbalance, your the frequencies kind of move. That overabundance is happening sometimes and it's not happening other times. Here's why. If I project louder, more of those reflections are going to get back into the microphone, that second source that the mic is picking up. So if I'm speaking quietly and I'm not projecting as much, those reflections aren't also being picked up, so that overabundance isn't as loud. If I'm speaking louder onto the microphone, at certain phrases or certain words, I'm projecting more of that frequency reflection, or that reflection is getting into the microphone, causing that one frequency imbalance to happen more often. That's unstable. That means sometimes I'm having the overabundance more than other times, depending upon how I'm speaking. So that means that the EQ has to kind of shift and move around, and you can't get a consistent. That's a really good way to describe it too. A lot of people are trying to EQ something, but it sounds good sometimes and it doesn't sound good other times. And here's what you really need to understand. The more stable, the more balanced you can get your raw audio capture before you do any processing, the easier everything becomes downstream. The easier the processing becomes, it's easier to EQ. Often I hear people who've taken my EQ course or have followed my videos for a long time, they're like, hey, I do everything that you're talking about, Lenny. I've found those frequency spots and I'm trying to balance it, and I think I understand it. But for some reason, it's just moving around. That's because there's an issue in the raw audio capture. And if you feel like you might have a situation like that, send me your audio, because that's really the first half of what I do is diagnose what's going on. I always say that, you could send me your audio and I'll show you what your audio can sound like with my custom processing and see how it can be optimized. But really more than that, and I think more importantly, I can help diagnose and say, hey, there is an issue here. There's a gain staging problem. We've got a reflection sound, and I can point you in the right direction to resolve that. And then once your raw audio capture is stable, and once you're above the threshold, once you're in a good position there, then we can do a custom processing chain that's going to sound even better. So I've created a full custom setting for Mark that I want to show you and play you the before and after. But again, I want to invite you, go to my website, lennyb.com. You can submit your audio, and one of two things is going to happen. I'm either going to give you an example of what my custom processing sounds like on your voice, or I'm going to say, hey, we can do some processing, but I've diagnosed some issues in your raw audio capture. If you fix this, or if we look at this and let's work on this part, we can get that foundation more solid, more stable, and then everything that we do with processing is going to sound better. You're going to walk away with the direction you need to go to improve your raw audio capture so you can make that natural connection with your audience, with the people that are listening to your demos, with the people you're auditioning for, with your followers on Instagram or YouTube or whatever you're doing, you're streaming on Twitch, whatever you're doing, you can get that audio more natural and more authentic so you can make a better connection with your audience. And that's whoever is listening to your content. I'm going to play the raw audio once again, and then I'm going to engage the full custom processing that I've created for Mark. Let's hear the raw audio first.
In 1937, legendary aviator Amelia Earhart vanishes into the Pacific, just weeks from completing an historic flight around the world. No wreckage, no final answer, only scattered clues across remote islands and endless ocean. Nearly a half-century later, the mystery remains. What really happened to Amelia Earhart?
Processing is refining. It is balancing the frequencies further. It's making the dynamics more consistent. So he's showing up whether he is speaking really soft or emphasizing certain words. It's allowing his voice to feel real forward and real authentic. You hear every little piece and detail of his consonants and his vowels. But as we stated and as we've identified with the frequencies, this processing can sound even better if he were to go back and resolve that frequency imbalance happening because of the short reflection sound in his room. There is some noise that can be addressed that is also apparent in the raw file. I'm using an expander. Actually, let me run you through this here real quick, just so you see. He's got some mouth clicks. For this particular processing chain, I'm using Mouth Declick RX11, which does such a great job removing the clicks automatically. I've got my Wave F6 floating band dynamic EQ, and I'm going to play it here real quick, and you could see my band number 1, I'm actually using the compressor part, so it's actually a dynamic band that we're using. You could see it moving here. I'll play it for you.
In 1937, legendary aviator Amelia Earhart vanishes into the Pacific.
You could actually have one of the bands dynamic and actually reduce the volume in that frequency space when you want to. And then finally, I'm going into the Sheps Omni channel, another one of my favorite plugins by Waves, and it has an expander that I'm using. I'm adding a little bit of saturation. I'm using 2 different compressors, a FET compressor. I've got an EQ for sweetening. I'm using a de-esser, and then finally a real soft knee compressor at the end here to keep the dynamics really consistent. And then finally, I'm using a limiter. Personally, for me, if I can't get a great sound using the F6 and the Sheps Omni channel, it's my toolbox. It has everything that I need. A lot of other plugins can add certain things and be toys, but these 2 particular plugins, they're my go-to. I love these things, and if I can't get a good sound with those, there's usually something that needs to be addressed in the foundation of the recording, the raw audio capture before it actually gets to the recording software with the plugins and stuff. Now that you saw completely under the hood and what I'm doing, I want you to listen for how the noise is removed by the expander gate. I want you to listen for how the first EQ is really compensating, and it's being used to compensate. So there's a lot of pressure pulling down that overabundant frequency space. And then listen to how the Schoeps omnichannel is using the two compressors to even out the dynamics between the louder and softer speech, and hear how that sweetening EQ is bringing out the highs, bringing out those upper mids to really give that clarity, but not lose the warmth, and removing some of the mud as well. It really gives you a full balance, and it gives you a really nice representation of his audio. But as we mentioned, if he were to fix that overabundant frequency in the raw audio capture, it could sound even better. Let's listen to the whole thing.
In 1937, legendary aviator Amelia Earhart vanishes into the Pacific. In 1937, legendary aviator Amelia Earhart vanishes into the Pacific.
Every single submission that comes to me, I listen to personally. I examine it myself, and I get back to you and let you know if you are above or below the threshold, if you need to get some work done in your room, or we can process and make it sound better so you can be confident when you create your content. I don't want you to be shy, and because it doesn't matter at what level you're working at. I work with absolute beginners. I work with pros that are at blockbuster movie level content that they're creating. YouTubers who have millions of subscribers, or people who are just starting. Don't be shy and never criticize. I'm only here to help you, and I'd love to get you in a better place so you're confident when you are recording and creating content. It's scary, right? When you turn on the camera or you push record, you're putting yourself out there and you want to sound your best. I think one of the things that I help people with is confidence, right? When you know your audio sounds good, you can take that weight off of your head, and you can perform and do your thing without that worry. And it really allows you to be more you. Thanks for watching.